Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Real Reading Talk. I am your most gracious host, Miss Sasha. And with Real Reading Talk, I discuss the real systemic issues at the very core, the very foundation, as to why we have high levels of illiteracy in our Black communities. However, we have ways in which we can combat these issues together. All right, remember that it takes a village, okay? I welcome you all. Thank you all again for listening. Thank you all to my old heads for continuously rocking with me. I appreciate you all tremendously. I thank you all for sharing the videos as well. So it's showing that you all are receiving a lot of value with these particular episodes that I'm doing. So I thank you all so much. And for my newbies, thank you all for joining me as well. All right. Make sure you continue to share these episodes. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to get right on into it, all right? This episode is about how we should not be sleeping on those picture books. Yes, all right? When you think about picture books, typically, a lot of times what comes to your mind, well, I definitely would say for most of us, is you think about a child, right? You think about a child getting a book read to them full of dope illustrations, and you just have all these elaborate pictures and there's a lot of colors, right? Well, guess what? Picture books are not just for kids, y'all. And I'm going to share with you guys, I was reading through this book, which I love referencing his book. I've been hip to him for at least about a good 10 to 15 years, okay? And it's called The Read Aloud Handbook by Jim Trelease. And this book is actually referenced a lot by a lot of educators. And this book just goes into how the benefits of reading aloud is, and, how this is something that we should be incorporating all the time within our families. And reading aloud is not just relegated to little children, all right? He talks about in here, again, just like when I'm about to just, reference how he says with the picture books are not just something, a type of book that should be for little children, all right? He talks about how reading aloud and even picture books can still be read aloud to those kids who have gotten bigger, even adults, all right? How many adults out there have you who are listening have read a children's book or have read a picture book and you're like, man, this book is dope. I learned a lot from this book. And that's one of the benefits of reading those picture books, y'all. Don't sleep on them, okay? Because they talk a lot about historical events. And there's a lot of research that goes into doing those picture books. Because even if they're telling a story that may not be on a scholarly level, where they're using a lot of big grandiose words, they still have to do the research on that particular topic. And also one of the things that is beneficial, again, the extensive vocabulary word usage. That is something that you find in a lot of those picture books. In fact, it makes me think about one of the books that I'm going to share, because that's one of the things that I want to share with you guys today, are 10 books that I highly recommend that you should have in your library, are persimmons. All right. I remember seeing that word persimmons and when I was reading the book, Carter Reads the Newspaper. It's about Dr. Carter G. Woodson and him growing up. And he talked about the persimmons. And I was like, what's that? And when I found out, I'm like, okay, so it's some type of like a plant or whatever. And I was just like, oh, wow. And I'm like, and I said, I had never heard of that before. I'm like, persimmons, okay. But again, these are things that you find in those picture books, which are just so amazing. And that's why I highly recommend you reading those picture books. And don't think that, okay, your child now, they're like 6, 7, 8 years old. They know how to read on their own. We could do away with those books. They need more of the books, the chapter books, and it's going to teach them a higher level of thinking and all. Actually, picture books do that too. They help a child or a person think on a higher level. All right. Having those engaging conversations. That's how you're able to have engaging conversations, and you're, thinking about things, and you're using your critical thinking skills and you're questioning. And it's like your inquiry goes up and you're like, wait a minute. Picture books do that. on a major way. So now what I want to do is I want to share with you guys 10 books that I recommend that you should have in your library. All right. So that you can have these engaging conversations, and you and your babies, whether you got the little babies or whether it's your high schooler. Okay. And you guys can have a conversation about these particular books. All right. So the first book right here. I love this book, Unspeakable, The Tulsa Race Massacre, written by Carol Boston Weatherford, illustrated by Floyd Cooper. And this book goes into, in a beautifully illustrated way, the historical events around Black Wall Street and how it was built and how, unfortunately, it was destroyed. All right. And so this book right here, I highly recommend that you inculcate in your home library. Next book, Rashad's Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr. Well, this book is very important because this book talks about the Islamic holiday or practice, one of the practices, which is fasting the month of Ramadan, and then the holiday that follows it, which is called the Eid al-Fitr. And it goes through, it talks about it in the eyes of the little boy Rashad and how he's excited about the new Ramadan moon. And then you get to learn about how Muslims know when it is time to fast, because they have to go based off the lunar calendar, all right, which means based off the cycles of the new moon. All right. So this book right here, excellent book. This book right here, one of my faves, y'all. I love reading this book aloud, okay? A Bad Case of Stripes, David Shannon, y'all. This book talks about Miss Camilla, I think it's Camellia. I forget, I think her name is Camellia. What's her name? Camila, right? Camila Cream, y'all. And what's so cool, dope about this book? Because this book is teaching kids to be themselves. And don't worry about what other people think about you, okay? You don't want to try to be a people pleaser. You have to stand on your own, all right? If you like lima beans, like Miss Camila Cream does, then you like them lima beans. You own it. Don't worry about the other kids because they don't like it. They just missing out, all right? Next book, The Proudest Blue, A Story of Hijab and Family. Again, this book, it just talks about the little girl. She's just admiring her big sister who is about to start wearing her hijab, all right? And one of her favorite color hijabs is the blue one. And she, it just goes in the story about how she's so proud and she walks around with it unapologetically. And so it's definitely a book, again, just that supports you being yourself and owning what it is that you do and not worrying about what other people think about you. Okay. Next book, like I talked about before, Carter Reads the Newspaper. Excellent pick. This book goes into Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who, by the way, is the founder of Black History Month, which started off as Negro History Week. And so this book just goes into how he grew up and how his family, how his parents, they did not know how to read. However, they made sure that he learned how to read and how he utilized that skill to actually educate grown men way older than him. And he's a teenager and he's reading to them. All right. So this right here, excellent, excellent book. This book here, Teach Me About Malcolm. I love this book. Absolutely love this book. This book talks about our dear brother, Malcolm X, who was born Malcolm Little, and then he changed his name to El Haj Malik El Shabazz, and it just goes into his life in such a beautifully illustrated way. Let me just open up real quick just to show you guys some illustrations here. All right. All right. Those of you probably familiar with Elijah Muhammad. He was the one who had introduced the Nation of Islam to dear brother Malcolm. And then it goes into, when he starts to break away from the nation. It's just a beautiful book. And it's written in a poetic way. I love that as well. So it definitely keeps the attention of our young people. This book here, Abdul's Story, y'all, by Jamila Tompkins Bigelow. All right, this book talks about this little boy, Abdul, and how he wants to be able to tell his stories, but he struggles with writing. And he's like, oh my goodness, I can't write like these other kids. And he's feeling it, and he wants to give up. But then there is a guest teacher that comes into the class and reminds him that his stories should be told and that he can work on his writing. All right. And all he has to do is keep practicing. Okay. So it's a book about persistence. It's a book about owning your story and being able to share your story and not feel ashamed just because you may not know how to write it well, but you can as long as you continue to practice. All right. This book here, The Undefeated. I love this book by Kwame Alexander, illustrated by the phenomenal Kadir Nelson. And he just shows like different times in African-American history. He shows different people from African-American history as well. And he just shows the resilience of our people and how our people never gave up. They may have fought battles and they may have lost battles. However, one of the things that has been a true character of Black folks globally is that grit, not giving up, being persistent. All right, making a way out of no way. These are things that is definitely a part of the Black experience. All right, so The Undefeated, I highly recommend you getting that for your library. My Brother Charlie. I love this book, y'all. Oh my goodness, this book is just so beautiful. This book was written actually by Holly Robinson Peete and her daughter, Ryan Elizabeth Peete. And it's based off of Holly Robinson's son, who was born with autism. And she, and this book is actually narrated by the sister of the boy, Charlie, and how she talks about just her experience and how they were growing up and how she came to realize and how her mother found out, that he was born with autism, and how it just her feelings throughout the story, her interactions with them, and just showing the support and love that you must give to whether it's your siblings or somebody in your family or people in the community, whether they have autism or any type of special needs. It's definitely a story that will remind us about being empathetic towards our brothers and sisters out there who have that diagnosis of autism. All right. And it reminds me to always think about my son, Musa, which I've talked about before, who has autism as well. And then the last book, last but not least, Ruth and the Green Book. This is one of my favorite books, illustrated again by Floyd Cooper, written by Calvin Alexander Ramsey with Gwen Strauss. And this book talks about a little girl who's traveling with her parents. They're going to the South, and this is during the Jim Crow era. And then she did not know anything about how ugly racism was, even though racism was in Chicago, where her and her family was from as well. But she didn't really see it blatant like that. And she got a ugly whiff of it when they went down south. But what was so promising and beautiful was that she met beautiful Black people along the way, because her family was introduced to what is called the Green Book, which was invented by Victor H. Green. He was a postman who came up with an idea to put all of these different Black businesses in a book so that when Black people were traveling, they knew what places they could go to eat, get gas, to lodge, to sleep, to get their hair done, to get their car fixed. So he did that again, number one, for our safety, because he understood back then during the Jim Crow era, for sure, you going in the South, there were places you could go and Black folks can literally get killed. All right. So this book just goes into that journey and how she discovered that. All right. So like I said, those books, I highly recommend that you add to your home libraries. If you obviously cannot get the books right away, go to your local libraries, y'all. We got to make sure that we are utilizing these libraries. In fact, let me say this. I'm going to end on this. When I was talking to the executive director of one of the local libraries here, the assistant one actually, and he was telling me how the books were not getting circulated that much in this particular library. Now, this is a 5-star library, y'all. Okay. This is the East Cleveland Public Library. This library has a plethora of resources. I'm talking about a beautiful auditorium, a beautiful, just newly renovated children's section. They have they have their computer lab. I mean, all the different things, okay, that you could ask for in a library. And it's underutilized. And then when he told me that the books are not being circulated a lot, I'm like, uh-oh. So that's one of the things we have to make sure that we are doing in our communities, because you know how folks get, right? The moment they say, oh, well, it's not being used, it's underused, so why should we even give it more funding? They don't need this. They're not using it, right? And so we can't have that. All right. Whatever city that you live in, please make sure that you are utilizing those libraries, and not just even with taking out the books, even though that's something we should be doing a lot of. You have a lot of libraries. They have programs there. Just like with our organization, we have different programmings that we put on when we partner with the East Cleveland Public Library. And there are plenty of organizations, there are plenty of people who come to those libraries, and they're providing resources, they're providing programming that they're putting together so that the community can benefit from it. So I just wanted to give that public service announcement, okay? So with that being said, I thank you all again for listening. I hope that you all grab a picture book so that you can read with your family tonight, all right? And make sure, again, like I always remind you all, make sure you all subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure that you share it out. Make sure that you give comments as well. So I thank you all for listening to another episode of Real Reading Talk. My name is Miss Sasha, and you all take care. And remember to please keep reading for at least 30 minutes a day. Peace.